Hello, my drunken Buddhas. My name's Ben, and today we're going to be talking about perfectionism. It's going to be specifically in the context of the workplace, although it would apply to any context in your life, really. So does this sound familiar? You send off a piece of work for review, you're going to email it to someone, and you get a lot of anxiety about what they're going to say, the kind of feedback you're going to receive. You're very afraid that people are going to think what you've done is shit. That's what you sort of always imagine whenever you're about to send that work off. So you maybe you have a tendency to try to anticipate every possible criticism. You kind of, in your mind, you go through, well, they could say this and they could say that, and you try and change your work so that it it can't be attacked. It's kind of like invulnerable, you know. Or that's kind of the same thing as saying that you're trying to please everyone who could possibly look at it. This might also manifest as when you do receive feedback that someone says, oh, that could be improved, or you're missing this, you get defensive, you feel ashamed, you feel upset, you get a strong reaction of some kind, which obviously you never show. You just push that right down and just go, oh yeah. And then you go away and then you beat yourself up. It's like, I should have guessed that that's what they were going to say. Or maybe you find yourself, see, some of these things happen and you're worried about what everyone's going to say, and every time people are like, well, this is brilliant. This piece of work's fantastic. Yet every single time you're still nervous about what people are going to say. It makes no difference. You know, Jesus could be like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen, and the next time you just would be so nervous about doing another small piece of work you've done 100 times before, right? So this is what we call perfectionism, and I'm very familiar with it myself. Had a lot of anxiety around this. I remember every time I would receive an email, like my stomach would drop, or I got a Slack message, like my heart would skip a beat. It's just like, shit, what are they going to say? What have I done wrong? That kind of thing, right? And in this video, what I'm going to be doing is taking a close, trauma-informed look at what perfectionism is, and giving you some inquiries to try to suss out why it's happening in your own experience, because it's not obvious. People don't really understand what perfectionism is and why it's happening. And you can tell this because of how they try to go about managing it, right? Everyone tries to think and effort their way out of the problem. They try to perfect everything they do, right? They're just like, they work on the assumption that if I just perfect whatever's in front of me, make it fantastic, totally invulnerable to criticism, then I'll be good, then I can relax, right? But they kind of don't really notice that the next day you go into the office, you have to do the same thing again and the same thing again, and it never ever ends. So you can't actually think your way out of this problem. You can't succeed your way out of it. There's no amount of praise or reassurance you could ever receive from other people that would ever deal with this issue, right? That kind of stuff can help it temporarily relax, but it will always come back just as strong. And we'll see why very shortly. So what is perfectionism? Why is it so tricky? It's because it's a survival adaptation that goes way back in your life. What's happening right now, that the exact piece of work in front of you isn't actually the issue. It's what's happening inside of you, inside your body, and the beliefs you hold about yourself and other people in the world, right? That were forged very early on in your life. And when I say a survival adaptation, it means it's based on a nervous system response to try to keep you safe. So what you're doing with perfectionism is you're actually trying to get yourself to safety. Your body feels like it's threatened on some level. It feels like principally your psychological identity is threatened. Your identity as a good, lovable kind of person, acceptable person, and it's trying to deal with that threat by mitigating it, by perfecting everything, so you avoid the judgment, so you can feel better and relax. And the problem is it keeps coming back, and we'll see why that is, because the nature of nervous system responses is that they want to arise, and that's something like anger or fear or a freeze or a fawn response. They arise They want to then get you to safety, but they want to be felt fully, completely allowed so that you can move to safety. Only then will they relax. The problem is that when these survival responses arise, we haven't been taught how to deal with them. So what we do is, as soon as we feel uncomfortable, as soon as we feel any anxiety, we instantly go, okay, into our heads, okay, how do I deal with this? What do I do? Okay, I need to make this piece, and then you just concentrate on perfecting whatever's in front of you, making sure you don't reveal any flaws or weaknesses to anyone else. And that's actually a way of suppressing the feeling. It's a way of pushing that away, pushing it down. And when that happens, it turns out these emotions, these responses, they don't just disappear. They're actually pushed into the body. They then reside in the body, in the muscles, in the nerves, in the fascia, ready to be triggered again the next time any similar situation arises again. So let's see how this happens. Let's just take a step back. When you're small, right, your number one need is for attachment to your parents or primary caregivers, and this also includes, teachers you have, authority figures, because when you're small, you're completely reliant on these adults to survive. Without them, you're dead. And so it's very important. Children take on all sorts of behaviors to try to maintain that relationship, to maintain that attachment. And there are different ones. There's the fight response, we covered, that's getting anger, throwing a tantrum if you're a child. The flight response, which is just running away from a situation, hiding from a situation that feels threatening. There's the freeze response, which is where you stay small, hide, make yourself small, don't say anything. And there's the fawn response, which is where you people please, you change yourself, you contort how you behave and how you present yourself to get approval from others, right? And perfectionism is closest to the fawn response, right? It's a way of changing how you behave, presenting yourself in such a way that you don't get judged or criticized, because that essentially feels like, at the deepest level, it feels like death. Essentially, it's like, if I get criticized and judged, then I'm not going to belong, and then I'm going to be alone, and then I'm going to die. And that's kind of the all this stuff is happening very, very, very unconsciously, but that's essentially sort of the levels of what the mind is unconsciously going through, what it's figuring out, right? Back to this fawn response. When you're small and your parent criticizes you or judges you or says, oh, you should do better at school, or one of the teachers at school is like, at school they're very judgmental. You're entirely judged on like what grades you get, essentially. Which entrenches this idea that if you get a bad grade, if you make a mistake, if you don't do well, you're a bad kid. You're less worthy than others. There's something wrong with you. This kind of kid. This is what kids take on, and they take it on a very, very deep level, right? And there are very, very powerful feelings that come up to try to help them deal with that threat from school or from parents. That fight, flight, freeze thing I was talking about. But they're so overwhelming that children don't know what to do with them. They're never been taught, they're never been supported to really feel. Because like I said, these survival responses want to come up, be felt, and then go down. But we're never taught to sit with our sadness, to sit with our fear, to sit with our anger. Parents try and be like, oh, it'll be fine, just don't, calm down. They try and sort of repress it in us, you know what I mean? So do teachers, they don't know what to do. They just, just go outside. If you if you keep making trouble, we'll kick you out. It just intensifies all these feelings for kids, and they force them to push it down even further. But when you push it down, like I said, it just comes back up again. So what's happening here is that these early survival responses, fawn responses, fear responses, are kind of stuck in the system, and they're just continuously on loop, like looking for threats. It's like when these things are stuck in your body, it generates a feeling of being constantly unsafe, and anything that vaguely resembles that threat you experienced in childhood of that authority figure, judging or criticizing you, will trigger that whole thing back up again. So when you're at work, you're sitting there, you get an email, it's like, bam, that whole thing comes back up. And because you still don't know how to deal with it, you still haven't been shown how to work with it, you have to, make sure you perfect your next piece of work. And that's what you're doing every day. So, the idea is essentially there's a deep belief about oneself that we're not good enough, and that we need to please others and get their approval. And this is backed up by a massive fear and fawn response that has been sitting there in your body for decades and is getting triggered each time, some potential situation arises where you could get judged. And you're pushing it down each time and trying to fix it by changing the world out there, right? And your mind is constantly projecting the worst case scenario onto all the different people in your life and all the different situations in your life as a way of trying to, help you survive in this situation. Pretty intense stuff. So let's try and help you get a more practical sense of this in your experience. So I'm going to give you a few questions that you could ask. So I want you to sit down, take a minute, and imagine you're at work and you do a really bad piece of work. It's something complete horseshit. It's terrible. There are loads of holes in it, loads of flaws, and you send it off to your entire team to be reviewed. And you, or even saying that, even if you imagine that and really imagine all the different people and this really crappy piece of work, the more visceral you make it, the more effective it'll be. And you might already notice in the body there's some reaction starting. But what I want to ask you is, if you do a really bad piece of work, what does it mean, or what does it say about you? What does your body and mind believe it says about you? If you do a really bad piece of work, does that mean you're an awesome individual? Does it mean you're really competent and great? Or does it mean something a little more negative? Just stay open and just ask that question and just wait for an intuitive response. You'll know when you've hit the right belief because you'll feel a physical reaction as well. It's like, no, I'm bad, or I'm worthless. It's like, you can just feel that if you imagine all these other people receiving this really crappy piece of work you've done and go, what's this? Like, this is really shit. And that's it. That's the root of the perfectionism in your body. That's that belief. Because nothing's happened. You're just in your own mind here. Nothing's happened. Yet you can feel that belief, I'm bad. And you can feel that contraction in the body. That's the actual manifestation of perfectionism in your direct experience. That's what it actually is, a combination of thoughts and feelings. The next question, what's the worst thing that would happen if you did a really bad piece of work? Again, just imagine it. Imagine submitting a really bad piece of work. And just see what the little people in your head do. What's the worst thing that would happen? They might criticize you, send an email around to the whole company saying, this person's done a really bad piece of work, I can't believe it. Maybe you fear you're going to get fired. And then you can go to the next level, whatever you get. Well, what's the worst that could happen if that happens? If I get fired, what's the worst that happens then? It's like, I'm going to be homeless, I'm going to be out on the street alone. What's the worst that happens if you're alone? So then at some point you get to like a rock bottom. It's like then I'm fucked. Then I'm going to die. You see, you've got this chain that you've been able to follow of like that your mind isn't presenting to you, but is hidden there in the unconscious. Of like, I can't. If I send a bad piece of work, then I get criticised and I'll lose my job. I'll be homeless. I'll be alone. I'm going to die. And most of it is hidden from you, except the very top bit, right? The very first bit. And normally we don't go any further than that. We just go, they're going to think it's bad. Okay, I'll better change the piece of work, right? Another question to help you go further with this is, once you've done those first exercises, you might feel a bit of a contraction in the body somewhere. A bit of shame, a bit of fear, anxiety, something like that. Feel into it. Spend a minute or two just feeling into it, getting curious about it. And notice whether or not it's familiar to you. Then you can ask yourself, when was the first time that I felt this? Or similarly, who does this remind me of? You might find that it reminds you of an earlier time in your life or a particular person in your life whose approval you wanted or needed, and didn't get in quite the way you wanted or needed. Now, these questions, they don't actually help you to resolve perfectionism. They're just showing you what it is in your direct experience, because you can't, like I said, you can't actually resolve it with the mind, because it's linked to these survival responses, which are physiological in nature. They're before the mind. Your survival system is way older than humanity itself. It's like 400 million years old, like the core of your survival system. It exists before language existed, before human minds existed. It doesn't care what your mind thinks. And you cannot resolve it at that level, the same way you can't fix a broken leg by trying to think about it or fix it in your head. This is the key point to remember, because this is precisely where everyone tries to fix it. The way to go about it is to give yourself the space and the support and the environment to be able to safely go towards those feelings which the whole perfectionism engine is trying to avoid. You need to go towards those parts of you that you've had to push down because you were unable to handle them when you were small, because you didn't have the support you needed. So the shame, the fear, the anxiety, that fear of being judged, all that stuff is lurking in the system. And the only way to let your perfectionism relax is actually to find these parts of you and to feel them, to feel the sadness of being criticized, to feel the fear, to feel the anxiety, to let it move through the body, just like it needs to, right? That like I said, that survival response comes up and is designed to be fully felt, to be fully expressed through the body. But such a repression is so rife in our society that no one feels comfortable feeling or expressing any fear, sadness, or anger, or any of these survival responses, right? And that's why we feel so fucking anxious and perfectionistic all the time, because we've repressed this huge amount of survival energy that's just lurking in the system and is getting triggered every time there's any possible threat. So that's what I help people do. So I've gone through this process myself, spent a few years really diving deep into my own body, feeling into the sadness, the anger, the anxiety, letting it move through. And the difference is night and day. And I wouldn't trade what I've learned through that process or got from that process for absolutely anything in the world. So if that sort of intrigues you, you can check out my website, drunkenbuddha.net, or send me an email or a message or whatever. And I hope you found this helpful. Please do the exercise if you were intrigued, but just listen to the exercise. Please actually do it. It will help you sort of really get to grips with what's actually going on in your system. Take care, everybody. Peace. Bye.